my first impressions of this essay are that it's very well organized. It's 5-paragraph format. It's got a clear introduction, 3 key points, conclusion. There are clear topic sentences. The paragraphs are organized well. And it addresses the prompt really nicely. It even focuses on, at one point, it talks about underrepresented nations in a specific way, which I thought was well done. I thought that the introduction was a little confusing in one specific way. There's a good direct opening sentence that addresses the question, the prompt, but it was a little confusing because I was under the impression that skateboarding was already in the Olympic Games, and it wasn't clarified until the ending of the first paragraph that it's a demonstration sport. I thought that could have been a little bit clearer, but it's not a big problem. I think that the conclusion was a little weak, but that's typical of conclusions. I mean, you know, you get to the end of an essay and you have nothing else to say but to re-say what you said, and that's basically what happened here, was just a restatement. But that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's a clear conclusion. I think there could be maybe some specific examples, a little bit more detail, to make it more kind of exciting, but it's very convincing. As far as being persuasive, the clarity and the key points are really quite good. And there's there are no errors in this at all. Nothing glaring as far as syntax, grammar, typos. I would probably give this an A.
Do you think you could distinguish these from human written essays?
No, probably not.
Okay. And then, given that this technology is now available to all students, do you think you'll change your curriculum in any way?
I think I'll address this. I don't want to be someone who just dismisses AI or any kind of technology outright. But what I would probably change it in the sense that I would probably teach one of these essays and say, okay, artificial intelligence generated this. What do you think of it? And again, what are the strengths? What can AI do? And what can AI not do? What is missing from this essay? And maybe we can talk about the fact that I don't get any sense that the writer of this even cares about this sport at all. That's not necessarily a bad thing if it doesn't need to be there, but I might also emphasize aspects of writing that can't be accomplished by a 5-paragraph format. And that's what we've done in nonfiction actually right now is, where are you in this? Because you are not AI.
So the prompt was, have you ever felt embarrassed by the things that you used to like? And which is a pretty personal question, so I think it's kind of interesting that this is like the prompt that we're working on, or that we're using for this. I would say the responses, they're very formulaic. It's almost like you can just insert music here and say these things, and then insert television here and say these things. So it's like basically the same answer, just with a little bit different information. I would also say there's nothing very specific. It just says like a certain children's show that was popular at the time. There's no voice. It's very generic, which is the opposite of what you want for a personal essay.
Okay. So you can definitely distinguish it from a human written essay.
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that if a student gave me this, I'm not sure that I would know right away that it was computer generated, but the feedback I would give is like, there's nothing specific. I feel like anyone could have written this essay and said the same. What grade would I give this essay? Oh, you're gonna answer that question. Well, I don't like giving grades on personal essays to begin with. It check marks all the boxes except for personal voice, right? And so, which is incredibly important, but it doesn't make it, and it doesn't fail the essay. So I guess maybe a B.
Do you see any benefits to this kind of technology for English education?
Yeah.
So we were just talking about that, like if this were, like if a student had no idea where to start to answer this question, and this shot this out as your first, as an example. I think it would be helpful for someone to see oh, this is how you structure a personal essay. Here's how you might walk through kind of moving from one example to another. So it's as a generic example, I don't think it would be I think it would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I would say is if a student is just completely lost and they're I don't know where to start or what to do or how to write this essay, this could be helpful to get them moving in the right direction.
So let's see, so this is taken from one of my assignments. Write a critical essay on Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. The aim is to delve into one significant issue, theme, or motif in depth and detail. Cite examples and evidence from the text. All right, it's a really boring beginning, but it works, I guess. It doesn't italicize the title, which you'd want to do. It gets MLA style right, but it doesn't know you italicize titles. One significant issue, theme, or motif in the novel is the concept of time. That is true, but if a student took a phrase straight from the assignment like that and turned it into an is statement, I would definitely mark it. There's more interesting ways to say that time is an issue in this book. Woolf uses the character of Mrs. Dalloway to illustrate the way in which time can both constrain and liberate individuals.
I just want to say, there's a couple of points where
That's kind of the thesis. She's conscious of the time passing and the need to complete her tasks before the guests arrive. I would say that's not the main way that time is an issue in the book. Yeah, she's got some stuff to do later in the day, so she's thinking about time, but more than that, she's constantly thinking of that when she was 18 years old and she's 52 in the novel. So she's thinking about her past, and I think a human would probably want to go in that direction more, thinking of the meaning of time. Quote, she must go down to Bond Street at once and buy the flowers herself. I don't think that's an actual quote from the book. I might be wrong, but that's also not at all the best example of time as a constraint. When Mrs. Dalloway, all right, try a pronoun or try calling her Clarissa, because this Mrs. Dalloway stuff's getting old. Septimus is a shell-shocked World War I veteran, that's true, who was unable to cope with the passage of time.
People understand him, but also the difference in power.
That's definitely an oversimplification of his really complex PTSD that he's suffering, but it's kind of maybe part of it. But what I'll say for all three paragraphs here, we see that same kind of pattern where kind of generalizations are made and then the paragraph ends with the evidence as if the evidence is just put there and speaks for itself. Now, if this were a student, I would say, integrate this evidence into the paragraph more. But for Septimus, time is a void that he cannot escape from. I kind of like that phrase. Time is a void that he cannot escape from. But this is an interesting idea that if you're going to say, what can we get out of this thing? If you really read through this whole essay and then you wanted to write on this novel, you might want to pull this phrase, time is a void, and kind of think about that, maybe.
It also talks about
Probably the best phrase in this essay so far. All right, here's a conclusion. You know it's a conclusion because it begins overall, comma. It's a classic move of a kid who isn't quite sure what they want to say, and they're just it just shows the complexity. Trust me, I'm not going to say any more about the complexity, but it's very complex. It used the right form of effect. It used the AFF, not the EFF, so props for that also. Woolf's novel offers a thought-provoking exploration of the ways in which time shapes our lives and our experiences. And there is something really uncanny about this machine saying our, as if it shares this experience with me and I'll know what it means and it'll know what I mean and it'll know what this book means.
What grade would you give this essay?
I mean, it's hard because like if this was turned in as like a 4 to 5 page essay, I'd give me a break. It's like double space would be like a page and a half. So it's really hard to say, but even if like you say, all right, flesh these paragraphs out more, it's definitely in the B range, maybe low B, because I'm just such a generous grader, but realistically this isn't doing much more than a C because this thesis is really simplistic and it keeps repeating it in the same formulation throughout. And there's that pattern of just like dropping the evidence at the very end and not really doing anything with it.
And do you see any benefits to this technology?
Not yet, I don't, and I have read a few people who are saying that it can be used in like composition to kind of give students ideas or something rough to work with, but I don't see how this would help you out with the novel as complex as Mrs. Dalloway any more than like taking good notes during a discussion in my class would have helped you. Yeah, I don't know. The best I could do is if you put this whole thing out and you just looked for kind of cool phrases that say something like what you wanted to say anyway, and that person clicked on the line, time is a void that he cannot escape, and said, maybe I'll use that. Otherwise, I don't see a whole lot of value coming out of this thing. I'd way rather read an essay written by a person.